And we are live. Guess what's going on, guys? This is another Break the Base with me and Ken here on the Narik Chase channel. And if you've been new to the channel, we like to talk about whatever, whenever, however we get down. And for those who have been seeing our channel and keeping up with us, this video, we're going to talk about the X-Men film series. And I kind of want to dig in a little more specific about what's been kind of what are the negatives when it comes to the series so far, and what we would like to see in future installments.
So they need to fix the timeline. They've got everything all kind of jacked up. You don't know if you're coming or going now.
I think it's mostly because of the fact that that it seemed like the movies weren't planned for them to be more movies.
Yeah, they kind of threw a I don't know, I guess I want to say it was kind of like a reboot, but not a reboot.
Yeah.
When you came into the more newer X-Men or Days of Future Past and X-Men Apocalypse, because they brought in a bunch of characters and they brought in alternative timeline. It was kind of like, what is going on?
Yeah. My biggest thing really with just most of the stories pretty much is the lack of action, specifically mutant on mutant action, as well as the lack of the lack of development for the characters. Because when you think about it, almost every movie they introduce a whole roster of characters, but you're like, who the heck is this person?
Yeah, like where are they coming from? Where are all these sideline characters coming from? Unless you've read some of the stuff, you're not gonna get them. Where are they? Where are they? Why are these people here?
And they're interesting characters, but the problem always is like they're not fleshed out enough.
No, they. In fact, actually, you're gonna see a little bit of that happen in Logan. You're going to have a lot of stuff coming up in Logan, actually. Some characters I was reading about here recently was like, why have they not expounded on like some of the characters? Like a character you run into in X-Men Apocalypse is a character named Caliban, and there's not much really listed about Caliban. You don't get any story to this dude, but he's basically like a giant locator beacon for any mutant whatsoever. You can find any mutant anywhere in the world, so it's like, okay, but where did this guy come from? Where do you that's when you start learning about the Morlocks and all these other creatures that you see in the sub basement of that place there. Oh, but it's just like, come on, let's get with the program. We can go all the way. Let's all go all the way back to like the Wayback Machine and kind of work our way up.
Yeah,
because we have our original X-Men that we started with the X-Men back in like 2000, X2 2003, and then X-Men Last Stand 2006, and that's the original 3 movies that were brought out with everybody that we knew, Halle Berry and all them folks who were playing their respective characters, and of course our first introduction to Wolverine, who has walked right off the comic book into the movies. Hugh Jackman fit that bill. First time they introduced Wolverine in that movie, I was like, oh my God. He came right out of the comic book pages. I just, wow factor RS. And of course, Patrick Stewart playing Professor X, he fit the bill pretty well.
Great cast. That's great cast call.
No complaints about anybody in that department. Of course, we were kind of expecting to see some more mutants, but we kind of got our a little Saw series. But then they step off into what do we go? X-Men Wolverine, where we actually learn more about the start of Wolverine, on the Wayback Machine, when he comes back and, approximately roughly how old he actually really is. Because he's old. He's very old. But I don't like how they tied him into, I got to remember to read back on it, Sabretooth.
I didn't mind that because that's one thing I didn't mind. I actually liked it because because they're so similar. It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard for both of those characters to be so similar yet be complete from two completely different spectrums.
Yeah, I mean, because we've seen him in a series, and he's more animalistic looking in the cartoon series and the comic book series, and they modified him a lot more in the late '80s and early '90s to be not as much animalistic, physically looking, but still retain the saber-tooth look. And how we run into the Creed character now, we see that in Wolverine Origins, and how they tie in together there. I mean, it's kind of interesting to see that they tied them together as half brothers, basically.
Yeah.
So it was like, what? So, I mean, it was interesting. I mean, it gave some depth to the fight that we always see in the cartoons and stuff. You could kind of throw it. Oh, that's why they're always fighting. They're brothers. No wonder they're I should have known.
That kind of does kind of make sense in a way.
And it's like, oh, and it does play a good story, but I wasn't quite expecting that, I guess, to see that happen. So
yeah,
but again, Hugh Jackman, kick ass, taking Wolverine, Stryker, and that's also when we get to learn about Deadpool. Well, you don't really see him as Deadpool in that point. He's just a shoot mouth mercenary, Wade Wilson. So. He's got the skills, and they have actually a lot of characters in there that they really don't explain a lot about, and really they're blips on the radar in this Marvel series movies. They're there for just like a brief moment, except for Deadpool. But we move on to where are we at? X-Men First Class. Now this is where the reboot kind of starts. The characters that we've known, all the let me rephrase that, the actors who played the characters that we have known are now basically kind of like a pseudo reboot. It's almost like we step back in time to see them way back when, a young Magneto, a young Charles Xavier, all the characters that we know are when they first started. And you get a perspective of how the team forms up, how things happen. We meet Mystique as a kid, which was kind of weird because I thought she was actually older than Wolverine was. She came from way, way back when.
Yeah. I think that's one thing I did like more about the reboots than like the X-Men First Class, Days of Future. They did, and specifically with the three main characters, which is Charles Xavier, Mystique, and Magneto. They gave a lot of great depth to those characters.
I really kind of liked how Magneto really started. We see the older Magneto, the more angry Magneto, but there's a lot more to him per se. It's just they gave you see where he comes from. You see the buildup of the anger. You see the torture he went through. And of course, we see the same character Kevin Bacon plays rolling into later on in the movie too. So,
and which Kevin Bacon did a great job.
7 layers of bacon. Everybody's always wondering, well, that's where you get it from. 7 layers of bacon.
But this is one thing I have noticed that kind of frustrates me with the series is the fact that when you think about it, there aren't that many. I mean, despite this, the X-Men about, mutants and stuff, not only fighting other people, but also fighting other mutants and stuff. There is no mutant action like that.
Very little. Yeah. We see only like a tiny inkling of some, like when we see, let's tread back here. Where was it? And
I honestly think X2 was the only one where it was like you did see some actual.
Yeah,
it was action. It was action.
Yeah, that's where I was going back to, and it's like we see Magneto using his abilities. We see, we see a lot of action with the mutants, especially on the assault team that came in. I mean, hell, they beat the crap out of those dudes. But it's just all these little kids. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff going on. But like I say, you never really see like you do in the TV series or comic series where you see them, go head to head. I mean, brutality at its best.
I think the only fight where it was actually like a fight is when, and most of the fights are actually Logan fighting somebody.
Yeah,
Most of the
Mystique and Logan
yeah.
in the first movie.
And then there was Mariko and Logan, which was probably the most prominent one. Then he fought Sabretooth in 2 movies.
Yeah, and even in the, not the pseudo reboot, but in the Wolverine movie itself. Plus, you saw him in the later movie where they, actually why Sabretooth was pissed off about not getting the abilities. They fought together, and he could have killed him too. He just said, "I can't do it."
Even that second fight, like I thought it was, I felt it was a little bit lackluster. The first fight when Sabretooth was just kicking his butt, fine, but that's just always been one of the biggest problems with the series is we want to see some mutants just going at it.
Mm-hmm. You see more in the Danger Room than you see in anything.
Yeah.
And the Danger Rooms are like a brief moment. In the very first movie, you hardly even see anything going on. But then the last movie, you see the Danger Room kick in. You see a lot more with the more current Sentinels. But I mean,
yeah,
there's just not a lot of mano a mano going on, and that's what we want to see. That's what you see in the series all the time. Xavier stresses using your brains over brawn, of course, and Magneto is smart. And
but there's some situations sometimes you got to throw down. Yeah. Like back to when the military guys was raiding the house.
Mm-hmm.
And you see Logan wasting these guys. I'm like, that was beautiful. Yeah. And then you have a character that's a great character, but hardly has any shine. Colossus, what knocks out 2 guys, and that's it. I'm like, it should have been a Colossus and Wolverine just taking these guys out. Yeah. Like that would have been great.
Just mowing them down, just take it out. But they didn't do it. Like I say, they were just. Yeah. The main thing was, he told them, get him out. And he did what he had to do to get him out. And the Wolverine didn't care. He just flat slaughtered those dudes.
And that's one thing I didn't like about the films was their focus on Logan. Like Logan has to be the cool guy. Logan has to be the guy that's kicking everybody's butt. Nobody else in the series gets a moment like that.
No, you got to think most of the characters that you see, really, even in the comics, are ever that aggressive. He was designed to be a killing machine. I mean, literally from birth, enhanced by Stryker and the Project X stuff. That's what he is. And quite honestly, most everybody loves the claws and him going crazy. But you don't, he's a brutal war killing machine, but you never go back. I mean, you never see Iceman freeze anybody and smash them. You never see, Professor X melt somebody's brain.
Or, use Iceman to, make like a protective covering on him. And
well, he did. Remember, he blocked the hallway with ice.
I mean, that was just it. It was like a defensive maneuver.
Yeah, and you don't really see a lot of action from him until, what was the movie?
Last Stand.
The Last Stand, or
no?
No, it was one of the newer ones. It was the reboots where you actually saw the Sentinels in their capacity. And then you got to see a lot more characters in there. You saw Jubilee. You saw, Jinx. I think it was
Jinx.
Yeah, Jinx.
And Colossus.
Iceman, Fire. I mean, you saw them all fight, and that's probably the most action you see out of any of the characters in a, at least against the Sentinels. And that was it. Boom, voila, we're done. We get that really cool intro, and then it just kind of fades away until back in a no man land, So it's like
I think that's kind of one of the biggest, even when it comes to like, which was one of the biggest problems I had with the Wolverine. The whole movie, he fought humans. Yeah. I was like, even with him having this handicap of him not being able to heal, he was still overpowered. I'm like, give us a mutant for this guy to, who were the only 2 characters 3 characters that Logan fights no, like 4 that he fought, and they was actually kicking his butt. It was Mystique, Sabretooth, Juggernaut,
and Magneto.
And,
well, he didn't really. Magneto really doesn't fight. He just used his metal against him.
And Lady Deathstrike. And I'm like,
Deathstrike was whooping on him pretty good.
Especially Juggernaut. That's why I was like, I want to see him fight somebody that, you know what I'm saying, that can kick his butt, not a regular person.
But see, we go back to the mentality of Professor X. What was Professor X thing? Try not to be peaceful. And that's where I think a lot of the character setup has come from. Only when you see the sideline series, that you actually see more mutant on mutant fights. But in the regular movies, it's most of it was they were trying to stay underground anyway. They didn't want to be publicly known right now. That's what Charles Xavier was trying to do, was teach passiveness, but know your abilities, know your powers, and if you have to use them, use them. Yeah. So I think that this carried on with most of if you look at the characters from any of Magneto's groups and the sideline groups and everything else, they didn't give a rat's butt. They just went in there and did what they wanted to do, no matter what the consequence. If they killed a human, oh well, whoopie-doo.
I mean, have you seen Captain America: Civil War?
Yes.
Yeah, you see how they were able to balance so many characters out. And even with the airport fight, it wasn't one person. It wasn't one person dominating the fight. It wasn't one fight. You know what I'm saying? All of these different fights added into it. And even though it was humans versus enhanced humans, they still had their moment. Like when X-Men Apocalypse jumped off, everybody wanted to see this big battle between the X-Men and the Horsemen and Apocalypse.
Yes.
And it was decent for what it was, but it wasn't like what you expect. Like,
no, I thought there was going to be Apocalypse, as big, bad, mean as he is. As powerful, he's like number 2 or 3 on the Marvel, or no, I think he's 2 or 3 or maybe 4 on a Marvel list of superpowered characters that are just awesomeness. I was very surprised at how wimpy the fight was. I mean, it was just like they were just bouncing around. I mean, they should have not really stood a chance individually at all with him.
I wouldn't mind it if I would not mind it if it was okay. The X-Men fight the Horsemen, but then you got to scoot under there. Oh, you ain't got that ability yet. You have to come back for it. I'm sorry.
Scoot it. Scoot it.
I wouldn't mind if it was actually they fought the Horsemen of Apocalypse. I mean, a good, at least decent 10-minute fight where the Horsemen are working together, the X-Men are working together, and it's a straight up like a brawl. Like, they getting down and dirty. And we did get that a little bit.
Yeah, we saw a little bit with Archangel and Cyclops. Everybody kind of went after, at first, originally it was just like one-on-one, and then, as they knocked them down, you got 2-on-1 or 2 of them on 1. So you did see a little bit of that, but again, the scale of what we were expecting was weak at best.
Yeah, and that was like a problem. And then, of course, they beat the Horsemen of Apocalypse, and then they have this big battle with Apocalypse, which it was decent, but it wasn't like how should I say it?
It wasn't epic.
Have you ever seen Ultimate Avengers?
The animated series?
The animated movie?
I think I've seen parts of it, but not the whole thing.
There was one part at the end of the movie where the Hulk, after they defeated the Chitauri things, the Hulk snapped. All of the Avengers had to try to stop him. And not one of them could just do it by themselves. Like they had to keep, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, nobody.
And I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of that.
Well, we saw the Hulk go bonkers in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, like as far as like the Apocalypse, I want to see, which they did do a decent job of having everybody come together to stop him, but it wasn't as you said, it wasn't epic. It wasn't really memorable.
I was expecting a whole lot of craziness watching, the ability of Apocalypse to change his body and put those big hammers or grow in size. I mean, something
Do it faster.
anything. But yeah, I just didn't see it happening. It was. I mean, when he went against Silver Streak, there was a brief moment of, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
But everything else was just kind of subpar. I mean, I'm expecting, when they said I'm bringing Apocalypse to the movies, I want Apocalypse to the movies.
Yeah. Even with even kind of with the Days of Future Past, I liked it. But it was one of the things they did in the movie I didn't like was it was like, okay, the Sentinels were like wiping them out. And I'm like, I understand the Sentinels are wiping them out, but it's like we could have had a more epic, large scale fight. And I also kind of think I didn't like the roster of characters that they had. Iceman, cool. The Fire Guy, cool. Storm, Colossus, cool. And even Jinx was cool. But I was like, there are more powerful mutants. Yeah. I wanted to see them. You know what I'm saying? It's like
they could have just rubbed it off that they were wiped out anyway. I mean, you're probably the more known of your Sentinels is Nimrod.
Yeah.
More adorns to a he.
And
you could have had a lot of stuff in there. You could have. They even had a sideline story with Nimrod. When Nimrod kind of loses its memory and doesn't really know what to do.
Yeah.
And he's kind of floating around, and ends up actually kind of becoming a good guy per se. Taking out bad guys, and just like small criminal stuff until it finally repairs itself and understands what's going on. But I don't even mind the reboots either. It's not even like a reboot. It's more like what they were before we saw them in 2000.
Yeah.
Because you're dealing with the younger versions, a young Magneto, a young Charles Xavier, a somewhat younger Wolverine, Beast, when these characters are first, uniting, putting together and getting their story straight, and of course, Wolverine going back and changing things was what kind of threw the timeline off. To prevent the future, Days of Future Past, prevent the humanity from using the Sentinels to wipe out mutants in the future.
Did you know that I think in the comics it wasn't Logan that went back? I think it was actually Kitty Pryde that went back.
I thought it was. I thought it was one of the younger mutants who could survive. I mean, Logan, could, and he was alive then, but. Yeah, I thought I remember reading a series where that happens, and it was one of the younger ones. It was one of the young females that went back, either Jinx or Kitty or somebody like that. So I do remember reading that somewhere.
And even with especially X-Men: The Last Stand, like the only pretty memorable scene that you get on that whole movie was like the whole time, like where it was Logan versus that fight. When Xavier, like when Xavier and Magneto are trying to, I guess, recruit Jean, and they had they was fighting in the house.
Yep,
like that. That was like that. I did like that one. It was like, okay, the good guys versus the bad guys, and even though it wasn't large scale, it was decent.
Well, I like how they brought out the Phoenix though in both of the series.
Yeah.
When she kicks into full gear and you're like, oh crap, here it comes.
Do you think they should have stuck with like the original Phoenix for the Last Stand? Because I personally like that Phoenix.
Oh, Famke Jensen as that Jean Grey.
Like she was dark and she was using like the atomizing abilities.
Well, just a super powerful being anyway. But she was, they locked away that in her mind and to keep that from happening. And in the Apocalypse movie, it was like, it's there, but we're not really telling you about it. But it's, and now it's like, okay, it's there. You're going to have to use it.
Yeah.
Kick it in full speed. But she, being the introduction of that ability and power that she had the whole time, it kind of crosses with, it kind of counteracts what we saw in the previous movie with Jean Grey as Dark Phoenix, because at that point she's just lost all control and has literally turned into the Dark Phoenix.
And like I said, I did like that version of Phoenix.
I'm saying we're dealing with different time frames too. So you got
Yeah.
one who just really discovers the ability, and one who's had the ability but has had it put away, and then when the barriers break down and she kicks in, she becomes that dark character. So I mean, both are powerful in their own right, and I think they did visually well. Excuse me. Again, we're just dealing with two different time frames. I think is what really gives you the impact of how powerful. I mean, you see her as a kid, 18, 17, whatever she was in the last movie. So
I got to give it. Okay, let me ask you this: out of the first three movies, how would you rate them?
Let's see. X-Men, X-Men 2, X-Men Last Stand. Well, I definitely like the first one. Wow, I don't know. Let me think of how I would actually order those. I think the impact of the Last Stand was pretty darn cool. So I'd probably do like X-Men, X-Men Last Stand, and X2.
I was going to say X2. I was going to say X2, X-Men Last Stand, and X-Men.
A little out of order, a little different.
What about the quote unquote prequels?
Oh, and those? I don't know. Man, I don't know. I'm kind of each one has a little bitty piece of the puzzle, but I don't think any one of those really. I mean, X-Men Apocalypse had a character I was hoping to see more from. X-Men Days of Future Past had the Sentinels, which was really cool, and changing time to fix things. And then X-Men First Class is when they all get put together. So it's like I don't really think a whole lot of them stand out above any of the other at this point. I mean, I would have to really probably just kind of really comparative it, but I'd probably go with like Days of Future Past, First Class, and then Apocalypse. Maybe if I had to put them in an order.
I think mine probably be X-Men First Class, X-Men Apocalypse, X-Men Days of Future Past.
So last two swapped. Yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of it.
And I gotta give it to what's it, Oscar Isaac? What's the guy that played Apocalypse?
I think you actually just hit his name right. I think it was Oscar Isaac is actually his name. Hang on. Uno momento, por favor. Yeah, you got it right. Oscar Isaac.
Yeah. How did you think he played as Apocalypse? I actually liked him.
I think the character was good. I was expecting more, per se, from more of the shape-shifting. Stuff that you see more often, like the shape-shifting. Yeah. He did grow in size. I give him that. And he, at some point they kind of had him looking visually like Apocalypse, because he Apocalypse we see in the comics has been improved by Sentinel or Celestial technology. That's how he ended up becoming as powerful as he was. They didn't even cover that. They just said he was blue-skinned and whatever. I wish they would have done more of his pre-story.
That's another thing.
That would have made it a lot more, because all we saw was, just the initial of him transferring. He never transfers consciousness anywhere in any of the comics. That I don't even know why they even bothered with that. I think it was just purely to see something happen. But I mean, in the comics, that never happens.
I think that was their way of rebooting his character, because I don't think they wanted to go with the celestial technology. Because
how did they do it then? I mean, he had to do. They had some kind of technology to do it.
In this one, I think that was his ability, was to transfer his consciousness to people. Because if you think about it, what was he trying to do with Charles Xavier? To get his ability, his mind control ability.
Add it to his collective.
And I think that's what he was doing. Every time he transferred over to somebody that had a power, he took on that power. And I think that's what the movie was kind of going. And I ain't gonna lie, it was more grounded for me. And I did like that, because it became, again, it'd be hard to bring in the whole celestial technology without having to
They
actually.
probably wouldn't even had to really hit it that hard, really. I mean, you could have had him find a cave, discover the technology. The technology does something with him. Obviously, it didn't even have to say it was celestials that did it, but that his body got imbued with some kind of technological advancement that made him even more powerful and allowed him to absorb abilities of other mutants around him. They could have done something like that. I mean, it was interesting. The fight, the whole scene was good. They're going against an evil dictator. He's trying to take over the place, and that was all good and dandy, and I was cool with that. I just would like to see a little more backstory of Apocalypse, other than just I can't think of a name. Reading the story about maybe they actually molded it after somebody else's story. The Horsemen actually came from Apocalypse, not biblical portrayals, and that was kind of an interesting twist. Like I say, I was okay with him. I would think if he was a character, he had to also accommodate thousands of years of time. Being out of the picture and then coming back in and learning and absorbing and learning about Earth and everything that's happened in the last 10,000 years or however long he sleeps, because he does sleep for long times because he waits for moments in time. Also, I would have liked to have seen him bring around Mr. Sinister more.
I think Sinister would have been a good person.
Well, he was in there, but he wasn't in the Sinister that we know what him looks like. The white dude with the goatee and all that stuff. But he was in. He was in the movie though. It was Essex Corporation. Essex Corporation is Mr. Sinister.
That's it.
But it was a very brief moment. I mean, whoop, if you weren't watching, gone. So he was briefly introduced in Apocalypse. So that gives you something to look forward to, and maybe another, if they carry on with the same crew that we have in the pseudo reboots, that'd be something more to see or to deal with. Because I caught it on the very tail end. I was like, I saw the briefcase, and it just kind of, I was like, I know that rings a bell. I just can't put it together. And I was watching like a YouTube video talking about the movies and what was going on, and they happened to mention things that you see in the movies comparatively to comics, and one of them happened to be about the Essex Corporation. Like what they call them, Easter eggs. That's the word I was looking for. Easter eggs in the movies. Just like Logan, that's getting ready to come out here soon. There's a bunch of Easter eggs they've already talked about. Just briefly seeing, the guy with the mechanical hand that you see, Honey Logan. He's actually part of a group called the Renegades, and they're cybernetically enhanced bounty hunters.
Okay.
And so they're hired for a fee to go do whatever they need to do, and in this case, they're after X-23. I don't know how much of X-23 story they're going to show. I know I've seen some of the little teaser things they've done, like the little 5-minute thing about the claws and stuff like that, and her cutting herself in the room and watching it heal. And there was also a short little animated thing about, how she became to be because of the guy who's actually the bad guy in the movie Logan. His name is Price.
Yeah.
It was in the X-23 project. Logan, when he was becoming Weapon X, his dad was the person who created the Weapon X project. Logan, when he went berserker before he left the facilities at the dam, killed his dad, and his dad was trying to sneak out with a sample of Logan's DNA for future Weapon X projects. So he creates the X-23 project is created. They were all male, and they all kept failing because the sample was damaged. So the 23rd version was a female modified, basically clone of Logan. So that's where you get X-23 from.
Okay. I didn't know it was an experiment. Okay.
Yeah, it was. They were trying to, make hundreds of clones of basically a warrior Wolverine, but the Price guy said, no, it's stupid. You shouldn't do that. We want a male person. Well, the female will never be anywhere close to what a male guy can do. And so the doctor carried on her work secretly, and then they found out about it and made her pregnant with the modified embryo. So she actually gave birth to X-23.
Okay.
And then later on, they added the animinium to her because she has 3 claws like Wolverine, but 2 in her hand and 1 in her foot that comes out between her big toes.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit more practical in some applications. And actually, she does a pretty cool scene in the trailer, too, with those feet. If you watch for it, dude gets it right up in the freaking head with it. It's pretty cool. So it's very interesting. And Logan and I have a lot of I'm really excited to see it. And it's going to be R-rated, so I know there's going to be some pretty good slashing and thrashing.
It's about time, because all you can't have a violent character and then try. Like, I never understood it about the series, where I understand they want to appeal to kids and stuff, but you can't. How you want to appeal with somebody violent like that?
Well, look at Deadpool. Deadpool falls in the same role of the mutants, right? And his was an R-rated movie. And, I know kids went and saw it.
Yeah.
I did, because I saw them. But, Deadpool was definitely going to be an R. And Logan is based on Old Man Logan. And Old Man Logan is flat, bloody comic. I mean, it is bad, bloody.
I don't mind the story. I want to see action. And this, again, I'm kind of mad because it's not going to be like Logan's going to be fighting mutants. He's going to be fighting people. Just like you see in the trailer where he's in the forest and him and X-23 are just mowing these guys down.
Oh yeah, especially when she runs up and jumps off his back.
Yeah, I'm like, come on, y'all got to give this guy a challenge.
Well, the thing is, we're also dealing with a very, several 100-year-old Logan, and I'm kind of curious if he did something to himself, because as far as I know, he was pretty much going to be immortal. Just like Wade is, except Wade's got the cancer that always keeps growing back. But I always thought he was immortal because his body always replaced the cells. So I'm kind of curious. There's some wording in there on YouTube, and there's some Easter egg reviews, and it says, "What have you done?" So I'm wondering if he was just tired of living and found some way to stop his abilities from working so that he could just die peacefully, finally. It's one of those moments. Or maybe they'll undo whatever he did, and then he'll come back full steam, and then that'll be the end of the movie. Yeah. I don't know. I'm very curious because I was watching that trailer, and I should have added a link to it. But I was very curious about the what ifs and see what happens.
And I would have liked to have seen Deadpool. I know Deadpool's supposed to have a scene in the movie, but I'm like,
For Logan,
I think he's supposed to have a scene. Maybe it was the end credits.
I think he's going to be. I think he's going to be in end credits, if I remember right. I would be very surprised if he shows up in the movie, because I know they're talking about trying to have although Hugh Jackman says I'm done. Period. With the character, I've been doing him, since 2000.
Yeah.
He says I'm kind of done with it, but I think we're going to see a guest appearance in Deadpool 2. I'm pretty sure we're going to see Wolverine make a show because they're both a lot in the comics together. So I'm also trying to figure out if they're going to replace him, which I understand that you play the character for so long, and because think about it, everybody didn't think Michael Fassbender could play a good Magneto because he's excellent. I like his character. Yeah. I love the younger Magneto.
Who could they ask? I honestly think that they probably should go with Tom Hardy because he's got that rough look to him, that really like gruff look to him, like he's a bad boy. He has that look, and I think yeah.
Look here, Batman, I beat you. Come on. I don't know. He could. I don't know if we see any more of the X-Men series. It's probably going to be with our current crew. Less Wolverine, less Patrick Stewart. He's pretty much done. I think he bites the bullet in this one anyway.
You know what? I wouldn't mind Urban.
And I really don't expect to see. I mean, they've already done 3 together. The last group did 3 together with a few spawn-offs. So there may be, I think there was mention of one more movie, maybe with the current crew that they have now. And then from there, I don't know. I mean, when does a series burn out? We were
I
talking
think
17
for
years
what
of X-Men.
I honestly think from they've already done it. Now would be a good time to reboot it. Because the way they've already presented it, and if they are going to come intention of having a series, story has to be a good one. Just like the first movie, like we were talking about Warcraft. Warcraft was an obvious going to be obviously a series, but the first movie was so bad with so many plot holes and stuff. They didn't. They had to come with it.
Well, they got a lot of stuff in development too. We may not even see an X-Men movie per se. We're looking at right now. I'm looking at they're talking about Gambit, side story, X-Force, a side story, the New Mutants side story, Deadpool 2, and then there is mention of a X-Men Supernova, which will bring them up to the 1990s, according to this, from the 1970s and 80s. And the Phoenix Sophie Turner, who played in Jean Grey, she's going to be in the movie for sure. Said that the production would start soon, and that was as of May. So, I mean, I think we'll probably step away from the group and go more to the side movies for a while. And then if they choose to reboot after that last X-Men, the fourth movie, completely reboot it, or just bring in a whole new set of characters. Don't bring in the people from the normal. Bring in some other side characters like they did with Colossus and Deadpool. Bring them in there.
Which one of those Colossus did you like better? Did you like the one in Deadpool, or did you like the one in the X-Men?
I think I like the one in Deadpool a lot better. Just because he's actually always metal, and it's kind of he's not young and brutal. He's old and experienced at this point, older and experienced at this point. So he doesn't really. I mean, he knows he's pretty badass, but that's the most action you see him have in any movies. He starts beating the crap out of that lady, and he's like, I don't want to. Boom. Okay, you asked for it. So I thought it was interesting. I kind of like because he got more screen time, he got more into the character, a little bit more into the character, But in this case, I have to take the fact that he's older, smarter, not the young brooding kid that we saw in the earlier X-Men series.
Yeah.
So I mean, again, we're dealing with two different versions of the same character: young Jean Grey or older Jean Grey. Sophie Turner, Famke Jensen. Dark Phoenix just discovered her powers. I like the Colossus character no matter what, but I think the Deadpool version so far has been probably the more entertaining for me to enjoy the character than it was just watching the brief moments he had in the last couple movies.
Yeah. I mean, and I guess, when it comes, like I said, when it comes down to the X-Men series, I think three things that's always held this series back was stories. As for some of them, they are interesting stories. It's just aren't, what's the word?
Intriguing?
No, not the thing intriguing. They're not I can't think of the dang word now. When it's consistent, yes. They're not consistent.
Well, they bounce around a lot.
Yeah, like that. The fact that they have a lot of characters, but they fail to flesh them out. And X-Men Last Stand, they had the characters that joined with Magneto. Who in the world were they? I mean, I know who they were, but they didn't get into their storyline. You didn't know.
Yeah, you didn't know who Inferno was. You didn't know who. Well, I mean, you knew who Mystique was, but
like they didn't actually get into that. And also, again, the lack of action, because mutant action. Even when it's like them fighting the military and stuff, it still was like there was like no action whatsoever. I mean, there was some action, there were some memorable moments.
Yeah, but we're expecting like comic book carnage versus.
Yeah.
But I think in that same respect, though, we have to watch that Professor X guys are going to be like, don't hurt them, don't hurt them. They, they're just stupid. They're, don't know what they're doing. Whereas Magneto's crew is like, they know what they're doing. They're responsible. You can just mop the floor with them. I don't care. Just get rid of them. They're below us. So
it's like, it's like the X-Men movies action is like when you watch the Incredible Hulk, the old cartoon, the old series from back in the day, and then the action that we want to see is like the Hulk versus Iron Man in Age of Ultron. Like the city was getting destroyed.
Exactly.
We want to see some action.
Yeah, we want to see some fist pounding, butt thumping action. We don't want to see no pansy crap either. We want to see some good stuff.
And like I said, I always go back to it. The Avengers series, the whole airport fight. You got all of these different characters with different powers, and it was just a very compelling, a very engaging, and a very entertaining fight. It wasn't even like it was just total destruction, but it was just the way that all of these characters were fighting, how they kept interchanging with opponents and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't just like, Captain America versus Iron Man or Hawkeye versus
Black Widow. It's sweet.
Yeah, They were, you had Spider-Man or Hawkeye and Ant-Man combo against them, against War Machine. And then, you had all these different little, rotating around. You didn't have the even matches. You had some that were overmatched and some that were undermatched. They were taking a beating. They were taking a beating. Everybody was getting beat, Everybody kind of lost.
That's why I wanted. If they ever make another X-Men movie, that's what it needs to be like. They need to take some notes from the Avengers series, from the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe series. Take some notes and then get back with us with this X-Men because we want to see some stuff jump.
Yeah, put a kick into it. Engage the brain, people.
And like I said,
it's still Marvel.
And like I said, it's always been the characters. It's always been the action. It's been the story. And I want to say it was something else. But I'm like, those were like the three biggest problems when it comes to the X-Men films. And if they can get that stuff situated, the series will be jumping. But hey, we are coming on to that 45-minute mark.
Yep.
I'm gonna go ahead and let Ken go ahead and lead us out of this one, and we will be back for the episode 51, which will be talking about the Fantastic Four film series.
Yep. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share us amongst you and your friends, or Facebook. We're cool with that too. Pass us around, Narik Chase. If you like what you hear, comment on it. If you don't like what you hear, comment on it. If you want to join the game, comment. We'll talk to you. We'll have you come back on board. Come on back, It's like, say, throw something in. We don't mind. Having extra people makes things more interesting, It's just us, just me and Narik talking, but hell, we can have all kind of folks come on. So if you're interested, like, subscribe, and comment, and we'll be here usually on usually about 7-ish. Tonight we're a little behind, but that's fine. But do it to it, people. And we'll catch you next hour with the Fantastic Four, which should be interesting because I have a lot.
All right, then, guys. Join us for the second part of our show tonight, and we'll see y'all in a minute.